the budget that is also, I can't think of anything that, as the role that I have and the role that you have as elected representation of our community, that's more important than the budget. The budget reflects our priorities. It reflects our values. It reflects what the constituents that we serve want us to do. And we have had some, as I mentioned, some tough years. The last year and a half with COVID-19 and the restrictions and all the things around that have been very difficult. And it has caused a lot of significant challenges. And the budget tonight, and this is the 16th opportunity I've had to present a budget to you. And I'd like to say that at one time or other that they get better or easier, and they do not. Tough times, good times. We've gone through a great recession. We've gone through some growth. We've gone through the negative growth you're going to see tonight. Despite all of that, we're still keeping the priorities that we have for the city, and we receive that priority through public input. We engage. We engage this community in a lot of ways, whether it's town hall meetings, whether it's you're all, as elected representatives, are very accessible. The most accessible part of government is local government. Whether you're at the church or the store or the gym or just in the street, people come up to you and offer their opinion, their suggestions, their praise and their less than praise for what we do. But we choose to represent this community, and it's important that we receive that input from the community. So we do that through public hearings, we do that through town hall meetings, interactive budget sessions, community surveys, the work sessions that you have, the study sessions you have are brought forward by members of the community, and we do a lot of input. We do both the anecdotal and the ones where folks approach us, but we also reach out and we partner on surveys. In fact, the last survey we did, and you'll see these slides for the last few years, we did it in 2019. It seems like 2019 was a decade ago, but this was the last survey before COVID-19 that we did the year before the pandemic, and we were planning on doing it in every 2 years. We were thrown back just from a financial aspect and a budget area. We will be doing one next year, at the end of next year. In fact, I just had a great conversation this morning with President Wacker. St. Cloud State University does our survey, and we partner, and we've shifted sometimes some of our partnership priorities, but we're putting this one back into the university and hopefully have something earlier than later, so we can actually survey the residents in a scientific manner, and working with the input that we get. This is this is, if you're in private business, this is those surveys you do, or Yelp, or whatever it might be, the customer satisfaction piece. And the customer satisfaction of what we do is important. And we also, when we survey these, we asked questions about what people think. These are the results from an overall city services satisfaction of 94%. It also, when we survey, it's not just how we're doing, it's what do you want us to do? So we asked what those priorities are. And the survey that we did in 2019, the top 3 priorities, and this isn't different. We've done several surveys. These tend to be the top priorities. And I think for those of you that were out there running for office, I think when you were door knocking or calling folks, what do you hear? These are the priorities. What do you hear now? These are still the priorities. Public safety, road conditions, traffic congestions. Those were more specific, but in general, public safety and infrastructure. Those are really the priorities, and I believe they match up what philosophically I personally believe what are the role of a city. There are a lot of things that we're asked to do. There are a lot of things that we're even sometimes there's an expectation for the city to do. But there are other forms of government. We get often asked about the school district or the schools, and that we have a school board. In Minnesota, we have an elected representation for the schools. We have a county that focuses on social services, delivery services for federal and state services. That's a social service arm. The counties do that. Are there cities that do that? Yes, there are cities. I believe philosophically that's not the role of a city. That is the role of those other entities, or even in a lot of cases, the private sector. So we have our own role, and the infrastructure and public safety tend to be the priority of what we do, and it's reflected, as I said before, the budget reflects what the priority of the community is, and what we have with the resources that we have. And they're not endless resources. We do balance our budget. Unlike the federal government, we're required to balance our budget, and we do. And we don't deficit spend. We balance based on those priorities. Guidelines and principles, and these are the same principles we've used in each of the budgets that I've had the opportunity to present. First of all, it's not my money. We're entrusted with public dollars. It's not the council's money. This is the community's dollars that we're entrusted with. Core functions, as I mentioned before, is what we focus on. Priorities of the citizens that we represent. And we've always had a policy, and this is a policy both from the administration and the council, it dates back a long time, and that is to capture the growth. Rather than increase the tax rate, we capture the growth. We're a growing community. For 166 years, we've been growing. We grow every year. We grow not only as a city, we grow as a region. And we know as a regional center, when the region grows, our population grows from the external factor. We're a city of 68,000 people, but a daytime population of over 180,000 people, and that continues to grow. So when we look at some of the core services that we have, public safety and infrastructure, the core services, our police department is not a police department for 68,000 people. Our police department is a police department that serves 180,000 people. But we collect our property tax from just those 68,000 people that are there. So it's important that we partner and we do other revenue sources to help with that, with those areas to capture that. So we've captured the growth in the tax rate, and that is based on growth in new construction and valuation. Fees should cover the cost of services when appropriate. The word when appropriate is important because if we were to just cover the cost of animal control, your dog license would be $250. There are some things that there's an overall community expectation to cover that through property taxes, but whenever we can, fees should cover that. That's why we have enterprise funds. We do sewer and we do water. Those fees cover those costs. Parking system, but when times are tough and nobody's down and everything's shut down, people aren't parking, we have to cover that with other revenue, and we use, and you'll see in the budget, we do cover that with general fund. Growth, this is, it's always like to see that always going up, and there were times, but if you look at the growth projected from into next year, it's down from 2021, but still up. We still have growth. So you'll see in the budget we capture that growth. A little bit of a, just, so the public knows, we always, when we're looking at the 2022 budget, we're not looking, this is valuation, so we're not looking at what was taking place here in 2021. We're going back actually 18 months, so we're looking at the end of 2019, October of 2019. So that snapshot in time at the end of October 2019, this is where you see that growth. So we're going to see, as if anybody's trying to sell a house or buy a house, you know that residential property has gone up. So when we look at the 23 budget and we're going to 2024, we're going to see that go up. But we also see that in some cases, commercial property has not risen at that level. So we anticipate and look out into the future too as to what this growth may be if we're going to capture the growth. As you can see, well, if you look at 2013, if you actually go all the way back to 2008, you'll see that was negative that whole period of time. So that made it even more challenging, and there's no growth to capture, then of course you have to reduce spending, and that's what we've done. That's also what we did in last year's budget. Preliminary, here's the preliminary 2022 tax levy. If you look at, again, this is no increase in the tax rate. In all the budgets that I presented, we have not done that. We've not raised the tax rate in any of them, with the exception of 1 year. We asked the voters for a bond, a public safety bond, and that was for a police station and for a couple of fire stations and the employees that went with. We asked the residents. We put that on the ballot. It's the only time we've gone beyond this policy, and when we go beyond the policy, I believe it's something you ask the voters for, and that's what we did that 1 year. And that was in 2006, I think, 2007, somewhere in the early 2000s, but otherwise we've kept it flat. This budget also keeps that tax rate flat. You see the general fund, you'll see the, you look at 21 and 22, you'll see the additional levy parts of that. And if you look at, again, what we did with the airport the last time, that parking system, we shifted from that airport dollars because we got those federal dollars. So we covered that revenue bond for parking with that. And then, of course, we covered with federal dollars what we would have otherwise paid the airport. So we'll get into that in more detail as we go forward. But this gives you the preliminary 2022 tax levy. And going back to comparisons, and we'll go back, it'll break down that levy or those numbers a little bit more. But here's just a comparison on property taxes, and this is an important. The bottom line, the light blue line is St. Cloud, and the state average is that top line. So as we compare to other cities, and we do that in a lot of ways, we've kept that, we're still much lower as with the property tax in the state than the state average. I mean, certainly there are cities that are higher and lower, but it's important. It's especially important, I believe, in a regional center where 20% of our properties, 20% of the properties in St. Cloud is a regional center with a lot of nonprofit and schools and a lot of regional assets. 20% of the properties don't pay property tax. To put all of that financial burden for public safety and infrastructure just on the property tax would not be fair and equitable. That's why we rely on local government aid. We rely on municipal state aid for roads. We rely on partnerships with various entities to help with this. And the sales tax, which was also something that we can use for capital, which has been very helpful for the city, because that is where people come in to buy things, then can pay for the roads that they're on and the public safety that they're utilizing. Area comparison, and I throw this up there. I put water, sewer, and stormwater. This isn't the budget that does that. This is the general fund budget. That's an enterprise fund. But I do it for a couple of reasons. People always say, well, you don't raise property tax, you just shift everything to fees. Here's probably the more important fee, the water, sewer, and this is how we compare to the area cities. So again, what you get in water and sewer is a pretty good deal. You get really high quality water, award-winning, state, national, international, at a really good cost. And this was reflective. This is just in the area cities where you're at. If you look at statewide, we're in about the bottom 10% in cost for sewer and water in the state of Minnesota. So we give you a pretty good product at a fairly low price. Plus, we soften the water, so you don't even have to use water softener. So you save dollars in that respect too. Even as we expand or upgrade our system over the next 3 years. Government funds budget, here's again the breakdown. This will give you a little better looking at those priorities. What are the two top priorities, as I mentioned? Public safety, infrastructure, public works being part of that, roads. That's where you'll see a pretty significant change in public safety, public works going in from the 21 to 22 budget. You'll see that. And there's something need to explain a little bit too. 2020 is kind of an anomaly when it comes to the budget. So if you look at comparisons, you see the 4.19% increase. Again, still capturing the growth that we have. But remember, in 2020, that budget, we cut spending significantly. So that budget from 2019 to 2020 was reduced by about $3 million, in that area. So we reduced that. So if you were actually wanting to compare things, you'd probably want to compare 19 to 21. From the year 2019 to 21 for the 22 budget, because that anomaly year, we made a significant reduction in spending and in a number of things, even capital, those types of things. So, but despite that, we're still focusing on capturing the growth that we had for 2022. Information technology, when you see that 17% increase, IT's been pretty busy when you have a virtual life that everyone is operating under. And when, if you look at that, even our IT and debt service are two things that sometimes people, I think you forget. The debt service pays for a lot of those roads. So when you look at public works and you look at the roads, you look at a lot of debt service. So that also goes into infrastructure. If you look at IT spends a lot of time in public safety. So a lot of that IT work is in public safety, supporting the public safety component. Public safety, and I put this up only to show, and sometimes it's just a counter, perception or even, and we're going to have by the way, and I remember Councilmember Hontos and Councilmember Lewis asked to have the chief. We're going to present that. We were going to do this in August. We were setting it up now for the first meeting in September, so we can have all of the data, and it'll give you an opportunity to go through the budget, kind of get an idea and see the budget, and then we'll have that presentation that the PD will come out, kind of give you the numbers, give you kind of where we are statistically. This just is one thing I sometimes hear is, where the city hasn't been funding, public safety. This is just from 2013. It's, if you look at that line, we have never, in all the budgets that I presented, ever reduced our commitment to public safety. We've always increased where it's necessary, and it's based on growth, and most of this is based on growth. We make sure that they have the resources that they need, and technology and human resources to provide the safety, because that, even if you take public safety and infrastructure, public safety to me is the top priority. I believe it's reflected in all of our surveys. I think that's what there's an expectation of. So we put the resources, and we don't just throw money in it. We have done lots of reform. We have done lots of partnerships. So we have connected with the private sector. The Community Outpost is an example of private sector that is owned and operated by the Community Foundation, the Public Safety Foundation, huge donations from the Rotary and from a lot of businesses. And that is an engagement tool that has actually had a positive results. So we partner in a lot of ways. There's the governmental funds by type. Again, general fund, special revenues, debt service, and capital projects. Gives you, again, that same indication on numbers, dollar amounts. Where the money comes from, you've seen this chart. Do this every year. You see where the money comes from. Property tax being the biggest portion of it for the governmental funds. 40%, local government aid 18%. We've had less reliance on local government aid, but I still am a strong advocate. Our legislators know that from us because we're a regional center. It's important that the property taxpayers aren't paying all of that. 18% is what portion we get in local government aid. I think as a regional center, a little higher balance, maybe not percentage-wide, but a few dollars. We're still at the level that we're at is no different than the 2001 level on local government aid in real dollars. 2001, we received the same amount dollar-wise in LGA in 2001 that we are in 2021, 20 years later, dollar amount. So obviously inflation has gone up since then. The dollar amount we receive is the same. The percentage is obviously different than it used to be for the city, but it's important as a regional center. And without that local government aid, local or sales tax revenue is the other alternative, which I believe is a good alternative. It's just we have, unfortunately, they've put lots of restrictions and not the parameters that we have used in the past. So now it's project specific. And the last legislative session said we can't use it for roads, which I can't understand for the life of me. We can use it for the MAC, but we can't use it for roads, which is clearly a regional asset. All of the roads we would use it for are coming into St. Cloud and going out. So we're still going to be lobbying to hopefully get that change in January and February so that we can have that on the ballot next year. We have one more opportunity to convince our legislators, and I hope we can, that is a local decision made by our own voters. We're not asking to do anything that we aren't asking the voters to approve, but I believe it should be a local decision. Gives you an indication too. It also tells you, just so you can see, we don't ticket more people so that we can raise revenue. It's a small portion overall. If you look at going into the areas, license and permitting, we pay license and permits based on the cost of those services. We can't. It's actually statutorily against the law to actually charge more than it's actually. We don't take a permit in one area and then have it paid in some other part of the budget. Where the money goes, again, our priorities, public safety, top priority, that's where it goes. You could actually add in public safety, IT and some of the administrative support. Public works, you can add portions of that from debt service. So this is our highest pieces of that pie are our highest priorities, and it should reflect, and that's what the public has asked us also to make as part of that. The budget just gives you a little comparison, 2021, 2022, and again, I would probably go to 2020 to give you a little better, but this tells a little story here also. If you look at, in 2021, that budget was down $2 million from 2020, and this one is up in spending, but from the down in 2022, so it's an important distinction to look at. Tax plate is flat in both cases, in all 16 cases. We reduced full-time staff positions in the last budget by 9. And basically, we've put those 9, not the same positions, but 9 positions back. In this budget, the positions that we're adding are being added in, those 9 positions are not the same 9 positions that are being added in our priorities. In this budget, we are hiring an additional 4 police officers. We're actually paying for an additional 7 police officers. We have a partnership and collaboration that we've had with the university and the Technical Community College where they have paid for 3 of those officers. That is going to be transitioning to a different relationship, not paying for those officers anymore, but we are not reducing the amount of public safety staff. So we're being somewhat defunded in that area, but we are not defunding it at our level. So we are paying in this budget for 7 police officers, 4 new, 3 already previously paid for through a partnership, and that will now be paid for on the city, on that portion. And then there are a city attorney, which is a huge backlog. The courts have been shut down or virtual for a long time, which has caused a lot of backlog. That's a piece of public safety, our legal part, in order for us to keep up with that backlog, especially as the courts open up. That's at a minimum is a need there. And then there's a couple of people in public works, heavy equipment operators, 3 in public works that we're filling in those spots too. So in the priorities, public safety, public works is where we're adding 9 people in. So they're not person for person in the 2, reduction and increased. Capital outlay, again, police, fire, and public works. You'll just see that there's more capital outlay for what we have. Squad cars, some heavy equipment that we have. You'll see that breakdown in the budget when we get into it. But predominantly in the area of public works, public safety is where we're adding in those dollars. I should say also in the if you look, and we'll break that down even further, but it's capturing the growth. We're using a little bit of reserve and a little bit of the federal dollars. The federal dollars that we received, half of it this year, half of it next year, can be spent over the next 4 years for COVID related. We know that there are still going to, we're spending those dollars to plug the hole. We have a higher hole than the dollars we're going to receive. So we're being very cautious, and we're being very, we're not going to do half in one year and the other half the other year. We're going to use those 4 years to make sure that we can balance this out so we don't have a spike in property tax or expenditures. We're using a portion of it in this budget, portion of reserves, and capturing the growth to be able to keep these priorities. Infrastructure projects, road construction, that other priority that we have. This is 2021. We did a significant amount of road work this year. We have had that as a priority. We have focused on that part. We've been fortunate this year that for some reason, asphalt is cheaper, and we've had some favorable bids, several favorable bids. And when we have favorable bids and we save money, it's still budgeted for roads. We do roads, as you know. You've approved both Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the bituminous street resurfacing. So we've done a lot of streets. I'm going to show you a map in a second that shows you what we've done in 21 and 2022. In fact, in 2022, in this budget, we are doing more miles of roadway than we have ever done, or at least in anybody that's worked here. 20, yeah, in the last 20 years, we are doing more road resurfacing next year than we have done in anyone's lifetime here. Not lifetime, but work here. So we are, and if you look at the 2 years together, it's a pretty significant amount of roadways. We do listen, and we catch up budget-wise to be able to do it, and that's what we've been able to do by prioritizing public safety and the roads. But that's the roads. This is 21, 22. So if you look at all those red parts on the map, these are all the roads that we're doing resurfacing, mill and overlays, some cases overlays, and some restructure, whole reconstruction. Obviously, Cooper is a big one next year, and we're using, some of these have some state and federal dollars that go along with them, but this is the next 2 years. So all of the red that you see is, so we're trying to do it in You heard the priority in the study session as to how we do roads, how we come up with this plan to do that. Things oftentimes could change based on usage of roads and other failures of sewer and water lines, but this gives you an indication of where we're doing it, trying to make sure that we're covering a lot of the areas. We can add, if we get great bids, we'll do more resurfacing. If we get more municipal state aid that goes into roads, we'll do more resurfacing in there. We'll do reconstruction. We'll do some of that traffic flow piece if we get the authorization from the legislature to let the voters decide. There's 4 major projects there. And just so you know, if we don't, we are applying for bonding for those 4 projects for state bonding because they're still priority road projects for us. This gives you just a little less clarity on the roads, but at least a little better indication of the city as a whole. The red is next year or this year? 21 is red, 2022 is the yellowish orange. So you'll see a lot more in 2022. You saw a lot this year, you'll see a lot more in 2022. So that is the overview of the budget. We'll have an opportunity now over the next several weeks for the council and the public to really, it's on our website, so it's up online. You can go online and look at the budget. The packets, I believe, are available for you all here tonight to take with you, probably in your box, or we'll get them to you just before you leave here. Get your binders with the budget in it. And we'll start that process on Wednesday, and the 11th, 18th, and 23rd, or more if it's necessary. The public hearing and preliminary budget levy is set for September. That's just has to be done in September, but more than likely it'll be that first council meeting in September. What that does is sets the ceiling on what we can collect in property taxes from the public. So it's a preliminary budget. It basically caps what the property tax portion of that will be. That budget can still be adjusted all the way till December, only lower at least from the property tax piece. We'll have that certified in September. November, the preliminary property tax statements are mailed out to owners. November, we also start the enterprise fund of the budget. Again, that's the sewer and water, those that are not property tax supported. And then December is the public hearing, and then the adoption of the final budget and tax levy. Enterprise funds are a little different. Again, those are fee generated through users. This is the property tax budget, which again has no increase in the tax rate, no increase in fees, and captures the growth and prioritizes our spending to public safety and infrastructure. And in areas, when I say infrastructure, quality of life infrastructure, we put more dollars into parks this year. It's something that's important. Parks and trails are an asset. People choose to where they work to where they want to live. So we want to make sure we attract more workers and people to live and raise families here. That helps those employers and the community as a whole. So we've prioritized those. So that is the 2022 budget. Look forward to working with the council over the next several weeks and with the public and their input as we finalize this 2022 budget. So thanks for the opportunity.